And we're back with the cat. Finally! I'm sorry about yesterday. The computer crashed and, well, you know how it goes. Things happen, right? Technology. Who knew? Well, we were talking about quantum consciousness, and I talked to a couple of people about it, and I thought, well, should we, tell people, you talk about microtubules and all that stuff, and people aren't going to understand it if they don't understand the brain, right? So we're going to do some basics, and today we're going to do the basics of the neuron, okay? So what I did is I put everything into AI, okay? I just scripted it and put it into the AI because I talk slow. I know I do. I get lost in the sauce. Good morning, Karis and Beth. So in order to understand quantum consciousness, we have to understand how the brain works first. But we'll do one live stream on quantum consciousness, and we'll do a bunch of these smaller live streams to get you caught up on how the brain works. A lot of people will know, okay? So it might be redundant for you, but, all the images in this video that I've made come from Neuroscience, the 6th edition. All right, so without further ado, let's go.
So here we can see a variety of different types of cells. There are neurons, which are the primary processors of neural signals. There are neuroglial cells, or just glee for short, perform a rich variety of functions. To summarize those functions, they support the electrical and the chemical function of neurons. The brain is a highly vascular structure requiring a constant supply of blood that includes nutrients, such as glucose, oxygen, and the ability to eliminate waste substances like carbon dioxide.
Okay, so you have these three primary, right? There's astrocytes, there's all kinds of different cells in the brain, right? We're going to go through, today we're just doing neurons, okay? Just neurons, then we'll go to the glia and the vascular.
So with that rich supply of blood, we find throughout the central nervous system vascular endothelium cells in brain tissue as well. So neurons have a cell body which contains all the essential organelles, importantly including the nucleus, that are common to other somatic cells. And for most neurons, the cell body is actually quite rich in organelles because of the incredible synthetic capacities that are required for neurons to maintain their morphology, as well as to support their function. So we find an abundance of endoplasmic reticulum, both smooth and rough, for the synthesis of lipid molecules and proteins, respectively. We find an abundance of mitochondria to generate the enormous energy supply that's necessary to keep neurons' functions within their homeostatic states. So, for a variety of reasons, the cell body is a very important component of the neuron. Now, from that cell body grow out numerous different sorts of protoplasmic extensions. Here is one set of extensions which are typically short, about 100 microns in length, and they emanate in all different directions from the cell body. These are called dendrites. Now, dendrites are very important for the microanatomy of a neuron, because what they do is that they extend the surface area that allows the cell to receive inputs from other neurons. So wherever we see dendrites, we think of this as an input zone, because dendrites are the means by which cells receive synaptic contacts from other neurons. Now, some synaptic contacts are made directly into cell bodies, but for the most part we find them on dendrites. Now, dendrites also have some very peculiar, very fine microstructural features, and these are called spines. Imagine that's a dendrite. And if we were to look at very high power, we might see under a microscope that there are these tiny mushroom-shaped protrusions. Out the side of that dendrite, these are called spines. Sometimes they're not quite so mushroom-like in their shape. They're more of a filament that extends some short distance away. And sometimes there seems to be little stalks and a protrusion at the tip of that stalk. So collectively, These yet increase the surface area of even a single dendrite and provide a place for synaptic contact from other neurons. So wherever we see a spine, we can be quite confident that there is a synapse in one state of formation or another from the axons that are surrounding that dendrite. Now, not all dendrites grow out spines. Some dendrites are smooth. And where we see cells that grow out smooth dendrites, we know that these cells tend to be those that have an inhibitory effect on the cells that they make synaptic connections to. So the presence or absence of spines on dendrites is one means by which we can classify neurons. And we know that classification based on the morphology of the dendrite. This gives some insight of the morphology of dendrites and is one way that we can differentiate various classes of neurons, even among those that do in fact grow out spines. One of the very interesting types of cells that we find in the cerebral cortex is called the pyramidal neuron. And it's called that because the cell body is shaped something like a little pyramid. And from that cell body grow out a series of dendrites. And from the apex of the pyramid is one rather thick, stout dendrite that we call the apical dendrite because it grows out from the apex toward the surface of the brain. At the base of the pyramid are a variety of other dendrites called basal dendrites. And this special apical dendrite might have some unique properties with respect to its role in receiving signals from other neurons, and those might be somewhat distinguished from those in the basal dendritic tree. So the distribution of dendrites is, again, another important way that we have of classifying different kinds of neurons. Some neurons are multipolar, and these neurons give rise to dendrites that seem to just emanate in all different directions without necessarily growing out a single apical dendrite. So again, another example of how dendritic morphology can give us some insight into the structure and physiology of different cells in the brain. Now, growing out from the cell body is a very particular protoplasmic extension that has unique properties that allow it to generate electrical signals. And this process is called the axon. Now, what's illustrated here is a fairly simple picture of what a typical axon might look like. It's a single process, often that grows out from the cell body and can grow for some distance. Some axons are short, being less than 100 microns, and others are very long. In fact, some are incredibly long. Consider, for example, a cell that might have its cell body in the motor cortex in your head, and that cell has to grow an axon all the way down through the brain, through the brainstem and into the spinal cord. Perhaps some length in the spinal cord, maybe even to the lumbar or sacral segments of the spinal cord. So that could be maybe a half a meter or more, depending upon your height. Or consider the motor neuron in the spinal cord itself that's going to send an axon out in a spinal nerve to innervate a muscle. If you're a very tall person, that axon might be close to a meter in length. Really an amazing dimension considering the fact that the cell body itself is probably close to about 50 microns in diameter. So that gives you the sense of how much biosynthetic capacity must be built into these neurons, as well as some insight as to their need for the energy and the raw materials that's necessary to grow out and maintain the function of that axon. Now, on the function of that axon. This axon has the ability to generate an electrical signal. It's a special signal that is called an action potential. That action potential is regenerated along the length of the axon, and in that way it propagates from cell body towards the terminal ending of that axon. So for that reason, we think of the tissue that contains the axons as a conducting zone and allows for the flow of information from cell body towards axon terminal. Now at the end of these axons, that's where we find our synaptic terminals or synapses. And these are specialized contacts that allow one neuron to transfer a signal to another. They come basically in two varieties. There are electrical synapses that have specialized junctions that allow charged molecules to pass directly from one neuron to another, and with it is conveyed the electrical signal. Other kinds of synapses are chemical, which is that there is a space or a gap or a cleft from one neuron to the next. In that cleft there is a breach by a chemical that's synthesized and released by one neuron, diffuses across that space, and then interacts with receptors on another. So there's a chemical message that mediates the electrical signal from one neuron to another. That cleft is breached by a chemical that's synthesized and released by one neuron that diffuses across that space, and then interacts with receptors on another. So there's a chemical message that mediates the electrical signal from one neuron to another. Imagine tens of thousands of neurons arranged in parallel, very much like the one we're looking at here. The appreciation about this parallel organization is that where we find the cell bodies and the dendrites, that is, the input zone of one neuron, we'll find the input zone of many thousands of neurons that are arrayed in parallel in tissues, such as the cerebral cortex. This is called gray matter.
Yep. So you have gray matter, white matter. Okay. But I'm going to produce these small videos and go live on them, and we can discuss them, right? But we're going to have longer live streams on consciousness, near-death experiences, all that good stuff. Did you know Mark Twain had a near-death experience? Hey, bring that up since we're talking about near-death experiences. Well, I'm talking about near-death experiences. Let me see. Here he is. I made a video on it. Let me see.
Shortly.
There he is. Hey, switch him over there. And make sure he has sound. Yeah, I didn't know that either. Who knew? But I was researching near-death experiences. Yeah, fascinating.
Before his death in April 1910.
Let me see. Let me get that volume up a little bit more, because I think it sounds a little bit low. There we go. There you go.
Mark Twain, born Samuel Clemens, reportedly told his daughter, Clara Clemens, that he saw his long-deceased wife, Olivia Livy Clemens, standing at the foot of his bed. Clara's later accounts were that he appeared to be speaking to someone unseen and described Livy as looking young and radiant. He seemed peaceful, not confused or frightened, and reportedly said something like, "Livy is here." Twain died on April 21, 1910, at his home, Stormfield, in Redding, Connecticut. His wife Livy had died in 1904. He had suffered from heart disease and was physically weak in his final days. Importantly, there is no strong evidence that he was delirious at the time. Witnesses described him as mentally clear near the end. Researchers in near-death and end-of-life studies mention Twain's case because the vision involved a deceased loved one, which is the most common theme in deathbed experiences. It occurred when he was lucid, appeared to comfort him, and happened shortly before death. His experience fits common patterns described in modern research on end-of-life visions, seeing deceased relatives, a sense of reunion, a peaceful emotional tone, and occurring days or hours before death. Twain himself was famously skeptical about organized religion, but he was also deeply reflective about death and existence. Interestingly, he once wrote, "I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience."
Yeah, so that is fascinating. I never knew Mark Twain. But there's a lot of famous people, right, that actually experience near-death. You hear it all the time around the internet, right? But I'm going to research those, and I'm going to make videos on those. I like talking on the live streams, but talking about the intricacies of neurons in the brain and all of that, it's like I talk slow. I always tell people, play me on 1.25 speed, because I talk slow. Oh, your cousin did? Really? And then died a couple days later. Yeah. It's fascinating. I want to get into all this stuff. Consciousness, quantum consciousness, near-death experiences. That's my niche. I love the brain. It's just something I love. And somebody told me once, if you don't do something you love on your channel, what is the point? And he's right. He's absolutely 100% right. Whether people subscribe, unsubscribe, watch, don't watch, aren't interested. I love it. I absolutely love it with everything. Been studying it for, I don't know, probably over a decade now. And so that's what we're going to do. And of course, I'm going to still upload the shorts on psychological topics. And that's where the channel's going. So thank you. Yep, this is a short live stream. Yay! She was upset that she came back. Yeah. You know, I've heard that, right? Because I've heard when you pass, it's such peace, right? Just a peaceful tranquility. And you meet your relatives, all of that stuff, right? And you don't want to come back to this world. Who wants to live in this world as it is now? But we're going to get into all of that. Thank you, Karis and Beth. I find it fascinating. It's just something that I've always done. And this is where the channel's going. Hopefully you'll stick with us. And of course, members only. Once the mangy mutt flips out, we'll cover him on members only, of course. You know, or anybody else that flips out. Who knows? But we're also working on the other 2 channels that I've just been horribly not working on, which is my fault. But that's where we are. And, do you get to choose, Beth? I don't know. You know, I've heard that it doesn't matter after death. I've heard there's such a peace. And, you know, the people that we knew in life aren't the same after death. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. Do you pass away and meet the rotten son of a bitch that ruined your life and what? He wants to come up and hug you? I don't know. I don't know. Apparently I pretty much died when I had that heart attack. I don't know. But I remember being almost hit by a tractor trailer. And I remember hovering above myself, watching what was going on. Who knows? There's a lot of stories out there. I want to cover them. Oh, teach people. Ah, yes. People have a lot of mental health issues in their life, physical health issues in their life. I'm not a doctor, not a certified psychologist. I just study a lot. So, that's where we're going. Yeah, Wyoming. I think so. From what I understand, what I've learned, what I've experienced, you know, a good friend of mine was driving down the road and all of a sudden the sky opened up with all different colors and it scared the crap out of her. And I said, well, yeah, that's, never mind. So, anyway, I'm not going to talk. I'm getting off. That's the basics of a neuron. We'll get into action potentials, what the right side of your brain does, what the left side of your brain does, the corpus callosum, axons, all that good stuff. So, and near death, and ghosts and spirits. Ooh, ah. Anyways, that's all I have for today. I'm shutting up because I could talk all day about the brain. Have a great day. Make sure you check out the shorts on psychology. And I'll make a special playlist for the brain stuff. Oh no, thank you, Karis and Beth. I appreciate it. And everybody that supports and watches this channel. Okay, talk to you later.